Okay, welcome to the FSH Society webinar series. This is an exclusive series for our most committed supporters. It's our webinar with our CEO, Mark Stone. I'm June Kinoshita, Chief Strategic Programs Officer. I first wanted to note a few housekeeping issues. The audience out there, you are muted. So if you have questions, please ask them using the Q&A link at the bottom of your screen. And if you have private messages to send to individuals or technical questions for us, you can send them using the chat link. Okay, so Q&A for questions for the speaker and the chat link for any private messages, technical assistance questions, etc. So it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Mark Stone, President and CEO of the FSH Society.
Thank you, June, and thank you. Thank you for this time that you've set aside in your busy time and busy schedule because you care. And more than anything and more than ever, I appreciate your involvement even in this way. And so we'll try to make the best of our time. I want to answer any questions at the end. And so I just have a few things to go through. A lot has happened since our time together sometime last March. We have we have refined some things that we set out to do and refocused some things, and we've moved forward with some things, and I want to share those with you in a reporting type of fashion. And then I want to talk about a little bit the challenges that we have that we can face together, but they're not challenges that we can't overcome together either. And so I wanted to emphasize that. We've created this, this slide here just to kind of illustrate who we are. The FSH Society has been around for 27, 28 years. You know, Dan Perez and his mother founded it along with Steve and others that have joined together. Many of you, some of you are listening today. And this, we have characterized ourselves, I think appropriately, as a research-focused patient advocacy organization. So research focused, that's why we were created. We were created to raise money to catalyze global research that will ultimately lead us to more and better therapies or therapies and ultimately a cure. We've been very successful in that. Everything that I talk about today in our ability to move forward has been because of this $10+ million of research funding, because we have grown the field. We have some amazing, brilliant scientists and researchers globally working on our case. But today, we're moving into, not out of that, we're still going to continue to invest in that. We're still going to continue to receive investigator-initiated grants is what they're called, and continue to fund that level because it's highly important to continue to fund the knowledge base that we have and to continue to grow that. But we're going to be moving into a therapeutics accelerator. We're working with industries because industry is now engaged and involved in our disease, in investing in our disease to help us get therapies to our families faster. Of course, our history, we're founded by patients. 90% of the board is affected. I would say the ones that aren't are researchers in the field. So 100% of our board is highly vested and highly invested in moving this thing forward. Today, we are the world's largest patient advocacy group. We have over 3,300 patients in our contact registry, and that empowers industry, academia, and the whole research and drug discovery and development effort more than I can even explain today. And so we present a powerful value proposition to the field, even in our patient database. And of course, we are an organization. We're a nonprofit. We've operated with minimal staff and still have that philosophy to stay as lean and as focused as we can, and yet ensure that we have the intellectual property on staff to move forward and to do what we need to do for our families so that we can get our treatments and cures to our families faster. We have much to celebrate. A lot has happened in 2018, and we're not even finished yet. Together, we have launched the Therapeutic Accelerator initiative, designed to eliminate the obstacles and speed therapeutic development. We've done that in a number of ways that I'll begin to elicit or to lay out a little bit later on. We are working with biotechs and pharmaceuticals that have potential new therapies. We are working toward and have launched the development of an industry consortium to overcome the challenges inherent in the clinical trial and regulatory process. And we're working now with 12 to 14 companies. It's hard to keep track because literally in the past 4 weeks, 4 new companies have called, and we're connecting them as a broker almost. We're brokering the deal between our academic researchers and industry so that those industry partners can feel confident at moving forward in drug development. We've launched a national chapter initiative. We're engaging local, active local communities. Our goal this year was we could have just only hoped and dreamed of having 10 chapters, but because of Beth Johnston and her team and the wonderful hearts and hands all across the United States, we actually have 15 chapters organized or will have organized in 2018 and moving forward to expand even on those in 2019. We launched this year a national signature fundraising event. We have had walk and rolls in several locations. We've had one in San Diego some years back. Of course, Colorado had done this. This was their 3rd year, but we actually went out to 5 locations. Those were our pioneers, and we really built a system so that it's systemic, so that we can hand it off to local communities to be our signature fundraising event, which not only raises funds, but raises families. It brings in a crowd, and with that crowd, we can talk about what we do and elicit more and more support from them. As it says here, our goal was $105,000 this year, but we actually went to $230,000 and really leveraged even more than that, over $250,000. And so all of this was made possible because we had the support and the engagement and the funding from you on an ongoing basis, over time. I've been over this, so I won't spend long on this slide, but it's a pivotal year for the FSHD community. Allow me to just refresh our minds that we have reframed our strategy, refined our focus, and realigned our resources. And so I'm going to be kind of outlining some of that. In reframing our strategy, I want to remind us again, I've been over this, so I won't belabor the point, or I'll try not to. But we've got 4 pillars. The first one is we're here to accelerate research to expedite treatments and a cure, period. That is our main focus. That is our obligation to our families. And that is why we exist. We are a research-focused patient advocacy organization. We are a patient advocacy organization. And so we are here, and kind of the second track, if you will, or the second important pillar, is we're here to enlarge, engage, and empower an active global community. As I'll mention a little bit later on, we want to make sure, we want to ensure that nobody has to walk this path alone. That as we are journeying this way, we all have company on the journey. We're here too to leverage and expand our resources to support the mission. Obviously, it takes money, but it also takes manpower. It takes hearts, it takes will, and it takes our efforts as well as our financial resources. And we're here not just to expand those resources, but also to leverage those, for instance, with working with industry partners to see to have them become part of our funding stream, to begin a grassroots fundraising effort like we did with the walk and roll, so that we can expand the base of our fundraising efforts, some of those kinds of things. And we're here to ensure organizational capacity to accomplish the mission. While we are a lean staff, we want to make sure, and we do to date, we have the intellectual property to accomplish what we have accomplished to date. But we want to make sure we stay alongside that and with that. We want to make sure that we have the ability on staff and in our volunteer leadership effort in order to achieve what we set out to achieve. And that's getting treatments and cures to our families faster. What does it really mean in practice? What do those 4 things really mean in practice? Accelerating research, we are looking at proactively designing and implementing through our Therapeutic Accelerator projects. We're looking to partner with researchers and perhaps research consortiums, much like Wellstone, the Wellstone groups do. Some of you are familiar with that investment, or like our Clinical Trial Research Network, to actively become a sponsor in projects that's going to fill the gap in a preclinical way in order so that therapies that are effective and that do work in the clinic actually get through the regulatory process into our families. We're looking to bring all the stakeholders together in an industry collaborative on drug development, with us serving as a general contractor. That's what it means when we say we're here to accelerate research toward treatments and cures. Engaging a global community, this national and even global chapter initiative with targeted engagement strategies aimed at expanding the number of active patients and families. As we get more and more of our families, of patients, logging on and self-identifying and going into our contact registry, our patient database, we are able to represent, we are able to get you, when clinical trials are happening in your area, we can get you all the information. We also become a more attractive value-added partner to industry, and they actually partner with us to move things forward faster. To raise and leverage resources. Leadership donor campaign that we're ready to launch in 2019, and you'll hear about that because we're getting ready to undertake some multi-year projects that are perhaps larger than we've ever undertaken through our academic-based researchers. And we're going to need those kinds of 2- and 3-year commitments in order to do that with some security and safety. And so we're going to launch a donor campaign, but it's going to be combined with an industry funding consortium that we're going to launch in 2019 to get the necessary resources to underwrite therapy. So you have our stalwart, I'm talking to you, our stalwart major donors, leadership donors that have always supported this. And then we have another arm or another leg of the stool, so to speak, with industry beginning to bring money to the table to work on some of these academic-based preclinical research problems so that we can provide solutions to them. And then, of course, our grassroots, the national signature event, walk and roll, and to amplify and diversify fundraising in that way. That's really what that means, to raise and leverage resources. And then organizational capacity. We believe that we need to acquire expertise to lead the Therapeutic Accelerator initiative, a managing director, a chief science officer, if you will, along with our commitment to our volunteer-led chapters to make sure they don't have to go it alone, that we come alongside them and resource them appropriately and enhance their efforts and their energies and their time commitment that they so freely and willingly have given us. Again, we've refined our focus. We've restructured and we've reframed our strategy, but we've also refined our focus. The research and drug development pipeline we've launched, as I mentioned, the Therapeutic Accelerator, and the community engagement pipeline, the national chapter initiative. Let me talk just a moment because this is very exciting. We just came from a chapter launch in the Chicagoland area this past Saturday. We had 35 people people in the room for 3 or 4 hours, and they didn't want to leave when we finally dismissed them. And they're excited, and I'm looking for great things, not just from our Chicagoland chapter, but from all the chapters, and I'll show you a map of that in a minute. This is literally us locating our resources closer to the families we serve. Or as I like to say figuratively, we started out with Carol Perez trying to put her arms, her heart, and her hands around a whole nation, and really a whole globe, a whole world of people that are living with this, with FSHD. And this is our ability to do that in an even more effective way. And so one of the purposes of our chapters, and we have 4 main purposes, is patient and family engagement and empowerment. We want each individual patient and each individual family to be their own best advocate. And we feel like that it's our obligation and role and position on the planet, really, to give them those resources to be their own best advocate. We also are looking to build communities and connectivity. I've just talked about that, so that no one has to journey, make this journey alone. We're one of the third purpose to increase fundraising capacity. And this literally becomes the fuel for the research accelerator engine so that we can go further faster. We can have the greatest research engine in the world, but if we don't have the fuel to get it running and to keep it going, we won't go very far or very fast. And then, of course, awareness and advocacy. And I look at that speaking one message with one voice, globally, almost 1 million strong. And so that's the purpose, kind of the fourfold purpose of our chapter initiative. With the goal, and while we've got 15 ramped up in the next 2 to 3 years, so not this next year, we're going to solidify our position and grow a few more chapters, maybe to 20 is our anticipated goal. But over the next few years, we want to have 30 volunteer-led, staffed resource national chapters. We also want to have some international, global affiliates that are just like ours that we maybe do some back office support for, but I won't get into that this call. Connecting more families, advocating for therapy development, and raising, I believe, $750,000 or more in the next 3 years. Here are our chapter sites. Here's those 15 chapters. I will click through these very, very quickly, but they have popped up almost this quick all over America, really with good, solid, strong leaders in every one of these. We've got good volunteer leaders that have said, listen, I'm in. If I can help in some way in my local community, in my local area, through my sphere of influence, not just in giving dollars, but in giving myself, I'm in. If you'll help me, if you'll support me, I'm in. Each one of these represents heart and hands of people that have committed their all to help us achieve the goal of disease-modifying therapies by 2025 to our families. And I can't, my heart is full when I look at this, and I am overwhelmed at the commitment of our folks. And I can't say enough good about this and about them. I talked about just briefly the global patient engagement. This is a kind of a heat map, if you will, of our database. This is not people we hope to find. These are people who have found us, who have registered with us, who we have their name and address and their contact information, who said, send me material and send me information. And so you can see that we are a global patient engagement organization too. And we want to provide and deliver treatments and cures to everybody. As I say with the staff, our role, our mission is to find a cure, make sure everybody on the planet who needs it has it. And then we're going to turn the lights off, lock the door, and go do something else. And that's kind of our vision amongst the staff. The Therapeutic Accelerator initiative. Let me shift into that now. As I said, we focused kind of in two ways. We focused on this engagement strategy, which has a national chapter initiative as its infrastructure. And now we want to accelerate research toward treatments and a cure through this Therapeutic Accelerator initiative. And that's really us taking a leadership role and a leadership position in some preclinical, early clinical development that absolutely must happen if we're going to get the promising therapies that are in therapeutic and clinical development now to our families, through the regulatory process and to our families. We need to reduce the barriers to drug development in FSHD, and those barriers I'll illuminate in just a bit. We need to help understand disease progression better. Why is it that identical twins, one manifests, one doesn't? Why is it that one can function well into their 60s, 70s, 80s, et cetera, and yet the siblings or the kids or something are impacted worse? We need to understand that, because that's a needed piece of knowledge if we're going to go into clinical trials, so that we know who to recruit and who to put into clinical trials for the best results. We need to make it easier for our people to get into clinical trials. We understand that there are some logistics issues, there are some trial issues, and we are representing you, we are representing the voice of the patient to our pharmaceutical partners, so that good protocols can be written and designed that make it easier to get more and more people into clinical trials, and yet continue to maintain the scientific rigor and the clinical precision that's necessary for the FDA to approve a drug once it is presented to them. We need to use the power of data to unlock breakthroughs. These are natural history studies that we definitely have in pockets all over America, and yet we need to somehow coalesce them into a large data set and begin to study and analyze those. And we need to catalyze promising therapeutic development. In order to do that, we connect with all the stakeholders. We are what our particular research-focused patient advocacy organization industry, there is an industry of us, what they call an honest broker. We are the honest broker because we have the patient in the center of our viewfinder. We're not out to make a profit. We're not out to build a career. We're not out to, follow any regulatory guidelines necessarily, or any of those other kinds of things that some of these stakeholders around the table, if you will, have to do and are obligated to do. And we don't fault them for any of that. We have the patient at the center and the heart of all we do, and we have the ability, more than anybody else in this circle, to bring all the stakeholders to the table to work together. We have the ability to lead collaborative preclinical development. We have the ability to catalyze early clinical development, enhance clinical trial recruitment. We have the ability to build, and have built, but we're going to expand exponentially, the patient engagement component of what we do. And we have the ability to influence regulatory review and guidance. You don't have to go far in history to look at some sister type muscular dystrophy organizations and see how the patient voice has actually positively influenced the regulatory view and regulatory guidance to get promising therapies on the market to their families. And we can follow that same path. This is the situation we have. We have promising therapies. As I talk to our patient groups around the country, I usually don't have this slide. I just say, picture, if you will, a delivery truck. It can be a UPS truck, it can be a FedEx truck, but it's a delivery truck. And it's got promising therapies in it. And yet it's come to a chasm. It can only go down one road. It's got one road. Every therapy that is developed in America goes down this same road, this same path. And so it's on this path, it's on this road. Our families are on the other side of the bridge. And as this graphically illustrates, the bridge is out. We can't get promising treatments to our families because of some of the issues that are inherent with how how FSHD manifests itself in families, and how incongruent it is to take some of those inconsistencies into a clinical trial. And I'll explain what I mean in a moment. But let me first talk about the promising therapies that are in our little truck off to the left of our screen. This is just, as a matter of fact, before this started, I was talking to June about this slide, and I said, we need to update this because there are 12 to 14 compounds now, not just 8. And they are all in some process of preclinical or clinical development. There are 2 drugs that are set to launch that are DUX4 repressing. Fulcrum and Genea Biocells have made statements that they're going to launch clinical trials in 2019. So while we say, and I tell our families this, while we say we want to have disease-modifying therapies to our families by 2025, if you are in a trial, and if that compound works, yes, there are 2 F's there. If you're in the trial, and if that compound works, you could actually have a disease-modifying therapy in the next 12 months. 2 big ifs, yes, but that is our hope. And there are so many others that are following this. We were on the phone, we brokered a deal, we connected our academic researchers that are connected in gene therapy with a gene therapy company that reached out and connected to us. And so we brokered a deal there. And there's yet another company as of today that joins this list and that are developing promising therapies. This is a gene therapy company, actually, that's moving forward and investigating and getting into our field. So 12 to 14, there's a lot. I know that if I have 12 to 14 attempts at the end zone, since it's football season, or shots on goal if you're a soccer player, if I have 12 to 14, some of those are going to work. Some of those are going to hit. And some of those are going to be effective at reducing DUX4 in our bodies. But let's get back to our bridge. We have promising therapies. I don't think anybody would argue that some of them are some of the, at least from a mouse models and a cell line modeling, very, very effective at reducing DUX4. That's what we're hearing from our pharmaceutical partners. But the bridge is out. This is where the FSH Society is prepared through the Therapeutic Accelerator to step in and to be the general contractor of filling in this bridge, going to what we might call our subcontractors, which are academic researchers that are good at each of the major components that need to be filled in order to finish the bridge and get the therapies to our families, and really to get it through the regulatory pipeline is what we're talking about. The first one is patient registry and natural history. By the way, there's going to be 4 major components to this, and these 4 major components have come from our international research conference that we host every year. The past 2 to 3 years, our researchers collectively have identified these 4 that we need to invest in, and that there are issues in here that we need to solve in order to get the promising therapies to our families. So this comes from our International Research Conference, as well as talking to researchers and individually talking to industry partners. We need to develop biomarkers. We need to find biomarkers, perhaps blood biomarkers that show a reduction of DUX4 in the bloodstream if you take a certain compound. Or if you reduce DUX4, does it actually have an impact, a positive impact on muscle preservation? And how can we show that through perhaps biologic biomarkers? Imaging markers. There was a paper most recently put out by University of Washington, Stephen Tapscott and his his fellow researchers that kind of, illuminated the impact of imaging markers that we need to do. The interesting thing about all of these studies is they're happening in pockets around the globe, but they're not quite powered well enough. For instance, you might have 25 families or people engaged in a particular research project when you actually need 75 or 100 to be powered well enough. Natural history, you might have, an organization or a research lab might have 800 or 900 families, and we can tell some things by that. I'm not saying those aren't valuable, but they're in pockets all over the globe, and if we can get them in a centralized data warehouse, de-identified, and yet that would be powered in the thousands, that would tell us some things about the natural history and progression of the disease so that we could take that knowledge and go into the clinic and clinical trials. Same with the blood biomarkers. And of course, the clinical outcomes. Our clinical trial research network is working on this. It's something that we funded for in total, about $250,000 we've invested over the past 2 years. They've gotten follow-on funding from 2 different organizations, the NIH and the MDA, totaling almost $4 million to continue on. That's part of the FSH Society leveraging effect. But as we solve these issues and problems, and as we contract with the subcontractors that can do work in each of these areas, the world's best, and we build research consortiums around each of these, and they work on the timelines, on milestone-gated timelines. In the next 2.5 to 3 years, I believe we can finish the bridge. I believe that's all the time we have to finish the bridge. And I'm running as hard as I can. Consequently, we're kind of looking at this Therapeutic Accelerator initiative where we provide leadership in the preclinical, early clinical development in 2 parts as an FSHD consortium. This is where we gather industry partners, and we believe that we could have between 5 and 7 industry partners give us a portion of the money we need each. And over the next 3 years, we could perhaps get as much as $5 million in funding to move some of this work forward. That won't be enough, but it will be a really good start in moving this work forward over the next 3 years. Along with an FSHD Vision Fund, it's where we partner with researchers working on promising therapies. We actually initiate work. We don't have investigator-initiated work because we have identified, matter of fact, our researchers have identified the work we need to do. And we are going to refine that identification, and we're going to develop a scope of work or scopes of work in each of those 4 areas. And then we're going to go to the world's best researchers in natural history studies, the world's best researchers in biologic biomarkers and in imaging markers and in clinical trial outcomes. And we're going to engage with the right regulatory people to help us smooth that pipeline out. And that's all a part of the Vision Fund. What we'll be doing next year is we'll be launching a 3-year campaign of all of our major donors, asking them to pledge for the next 3 years so that we have some kind of knowledge and some kind of understanding of what we can commit to as an organization to move this further, faster, and accomplish the goal. All of our industry partners, by the way, are delighted with this concept. They're embracing this concept. We visited them July through September, and we met with all of them. All of them have the same preclinical, pre-competitive issues. And all of them have embraced this quite heartily, if you will. I won't belabor this point. This is just a little bit more itemized around those 4 main columns and those 4 main categories that would fill in the bridge: patient registries, inexpensive and quick diagnostic, number of genotypical patients. All of that's around natural history and database. Biomarkers, imaging markers, you can see some of the itemized work there. And to get, in addition to all of that, we know that we have to clear the regulatory pathway. Right now, the issue is if we can eliminate DUX4, every researcher I've talked to, every researcher I think in the world says that will halt the disease progression. But the FDA does not recognize that as a valid clinical outcome. It's also hard to measure. And so we need to advocate and we need to work with the FDA going forward to make sure that when compounds that are effective and that are safe get to FDA regulatory review, that we have already cleared the obstacles and it can slide through and get to our families quicker. This is absolutely essential. I've mentioned to, I'm sure some of you that are on our video and on our call, that historically I've been a part of an organization that had a disease-modifying therapy that worked, that was safe, that was incredibly effective, and yet the clinical outcome was not embraced by the FDA. And it took 10 years to get that product approved and on the market. That would be a travesty. That would break my heart if that happened here. And I want to do everything I can. And I want us to do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen. Anyway, as a launch to that, over this past summer, we have visited with every pharmaceutical and every therapeutic development researcher that we know of. We've connected with them. We've visited them personally. We've laid out this path and this plan. And we've also told them that we're going to be hosting a meeting. This is what we've called an industry collaborative on drug development in FSHD. It's going to be it's going to be 1 mile from the FDA. We're inviting the FDA, we're inviting the EMA, which is the European Medical Association, and that regulatory environment. We're inviting all industry partners, academia, and we're inviting some of our families, some of our patients. We've set the date for March 12th, and this is the start. This is not the end. This is not a meeting where we're going to document it, we're going to write a white paper on it, and we're going to go about our merry way. From this meeting, we are going to develop scopes of work based on the agreed upon issues and the agreed upon solution to those issues. And then we're going to be going to our academic partners and we're going to be mapping out a 1.5 to 3 year strategy to get each of these major things, but each of the components that come out of that meeting solved, funded, solved, and that's how I say we're going to be a general contractor to this. So that's a very important meeting. It's a catalyst to the next 3 years of work that we will be doing. This is a little bit of the timeline. I've talked about the 4 squares. I gave you a little bit of itemized work that needs to be done. I've talked about the regulatory meeting that we're going to have and how that then is going to be developing a scope of work. But we've also, I just want you to see this, not necessarily to pay attention to the individual things we will be doing or the cost associated, because those are all estimates. I think they're very accurate estimates, but they're estimates of what we'll be doing over these next 3 years and when we'll be doing them. But I want you to know that we've got a plan and a process, and we've got some milestone gates that we feel like we need to hit to move this thing further faster. So I just wanted to show that slide for that reason, really. And now we come to the end, at least for my presentation. You know, our challenge, our hope. Why should we work together to launch these initiatives? In other words, why should the FSH Society and all of its members, all of the people who support it, why should we do that? Isn't there somebody else that can do this? Isn't NIH have the ability to do this? Doesn't this group or that group, or can't pharmaceuticals do this? All of those get a resounding no for all kinds of reasons that I won't elicit now, but I'd be happy to share with anybody and everybody later. But here's why we should do this. Let's focus on the positive. Why should we, the FSH Society, its members, its friends, you, me, why should we do this? Number one, we're the only organization worldwide who can catalyze all stakeholders. Industry can't. They can't bring the FDA to the table, and they certainly can't bring patients to the table. They're prohibited by regulations from doing that. The researchers, sometimes they can't engage industry. For instance, we had researchers yesterday that we connected with industry so that now they're a creative partnership that has the potential of moving a gene therapy on further faster, as the researcher said yesterday on the call that we hosted. Regulatory agencies can't. They're responsive. They're not proactive. And our families, individually, our families can't. Collectively, though, we can empower this whole thing. We can catalyze all stakeholders and bring to the table to work on these issues that we need to solve, these problems that we need to solve, these challenges. We can serve, as I've mentioned, as an honest broker and a general contractor. Some of that has already been proven, but as we continue to gain more expertise and venture more into this, we will become a bigger, stronger, and more powerful player on your behalf, on behalf of all of our families. We have access to the largest patient contact registry in the world, and we're prepared now from a technological standpoint to enlarge that exponentially. And so we're going to be reaching out not just through our national chapter network to continue to grow, to continue to find patients and to engage patients and to empower patients. But we're also going to be reaching out through the creation or investigating, creating really a global alliance of organizations just like ours, creating them, backstopping them, empowering them to reach out to more families globally. And as we say it, if not us, then who? And if not now, then when? If not us, there is no one else. And if not now, then when are we going to do it? When are we going to get about the business? I already feel like I'm running about 9 months behind. And one of our researchers said, Mark, you're about 3 years behind because it's coming. I said, I know, we're running. We're going as fast as we can. Anyway, we're the only organization worldwide that can do all of this. I believe we also have a moral obligation to the families we serve and the families who count on us. Each and every one of them are fixed in my viewfinder. They are fixed in our staff's viewfinder. We are challenged and we care. We grimace and we celebrate with our families. And I believe since we have the ability to do it, and since we have been entrusted with the resources, even the resources we currently have, we now have a moral obligation to our families we serve to do this, to launch out, to succeed in our quest. I believe, too, the FSH Society is a good steward of resources and therefore a good investment. I think you believe that, too. I've lost track of the number of years. It's been well over a decade, 13, 14 years, that we've been the highest rated charity. Guide Star, we're gold heading toward platinum, whatever that is, their highest ranking. We are a good steward of resources. We operate lean and focused with an incredibly awesome and professional staff. And allow me, I got to thinking today, you know, anybody can do the ordinary. I want to challenge us together. I want to challenge us together to do the extraordinary, to go the extra mile, to do something that even surprises ourselves, but something that really moves the needle. And I want to say that some on our executive board already have taken the challenge without asking, but knowing that we're going to be moving into a 3-year pledge campaign. They have stepped up and said, And Mark, I want you to know that in 19, 20, and 21, we're going to increase our pledge. We're going to increase the amount we give. And it's somewhere, but they're increasing it somewhere between 30 and 70% of the depth of their resources that they were already giving. When they told me that, each individual board member told me that, I started to cry. I was moved. So the executive board, and I'm sure the whole board leadership will follow with this. And so I want to challenge us today, this year, and over the next 3 years to consider doing the extraordinary. Really what I want is the best of us, and I want the best from us. The future of FSH research is in powerful hands. Yours. Thank you for your time. I've left less time than I thought for questions, but if you've sent in any questions, and or June, if you've got any questions.
Yes, we have a question, which is, what can we do, the audience I think, to help that challenge? And it's maybe more.
Yeah, you have to speak up just a little bit.
Oh, could you hear me? Sorry.
Yeah.
They want to know, what can they do to meet this challenge? You know.
Well, literally, over the next 3 years, and I've laid this out for the executive committee of our board, we need to raise $10 million from our major donors and leadership donors. And that's you who've been invited to this call. Now, $10 million over 3 years, $3.3 million a year seems like a ridiculously incredible, impossible amount of money. But if you take our leadership and major donors over the past 3 years, you all sacrificially have given about an average of 2.7 to 2.8 million. And so you see that for another $700,000 from all of us, lifting together, we can hit that level and that goal. Also, be engaged and involved in a local chapter that's near you. Be engaged and involved. I don't have a lot of affluence. I don't have a lot of money. I can give on a monthly basis a lot more than I can give in one check. And that's just the economics of Mark Stone. But I have influence. And what I can do is I can influence a sphere of people around me to join me in my cause. You want to know how we raised in 5 walks $230,000? It's through people's influence. It's in the tens and 20s and hundreds and $150, and there were some large gifts in there, but by and large, it was people who said, I can't give much, but I can reach out to my list, and I can tell them what I'm doing. I can involve them in the process. So while we're going to be asking our major donors and our leadership level donors for a 3-year commitment this next year, as well as supporting us here at the end of the year, in order to fuel this research, to fuel the jets that are going to accomplish this research. I also would appreciate your involvement by reaching out across your influence network and helping us lift the load. Anyway, any other?
Yeah. Yes, we have another question with regard to clinical trials. It says, what is the time frame that you envision for easier access to clinical trials? I suppose meaning where they're recruiting patients, more widely geographically.
Yeah, I believe that in phase 2 trials, there's 3 phases of a clinical trial. There's the safety phase, and a lot of these, because their repurposed drugs have already a safety protocol. That saves us about 1.5 years, 2 years off the development process. But in your first initial phase 2 or phase 2A, they might have 25 to 50 patients in a rare disease. And that would be limited. We believe that it will be through our clinical trial research network, perhaps. We have been contacted by those that would conduct the trial on behalf of our pharmaceutical partners to partner with them at recruiting, and we're going to do that. But the phase 3 trial, which might be in maybe 2 years, and this is all a guess by me, would be expansive and it would be global. It would be in scores of sites around America, and it would even be in several sites international. And so I believe in the next, let's say 3 to 4 years, that those phase 3 trials would be well underway. It's an educated guess by me, but that's a guess.
Well, I would mention also the Acceleron trial is being conducted in, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. It's being conducted in over a dozen sites, including sites in Spain. So even at a later stage phase 2 trial, there are a significant number of sites around the country. So we expect that to just continue to evolve in that direction. There's another question. Are there any trials planned outside of the U.S.? And maybe, yeah.
It would be the Acceleron trial now, but yes, as I mentioned in the previous answer, in the next, I think 3 to 4 years, which is again why we want to take the proactive stance of developing like-minded patient advocacy groups around the world, France, UK, Italy, the Netherlands, India, China, et cetera, and facilitating their success so that when clinical trials globally do happen, because they will happen, that the enrollment will be quick and it will be successful. One mention I will point out, 80% of all clinical trials in all disease manifests in America fail, not because the drug didn't work or the compound didn't work, but because they failed to recruit an adequate number of people to try it. I don't want that to happen here. So we're working actively to ensure that that doesn't happen.
Another question, let me see. Okay, so this is a question from an individual who said that they are wondering about the criteria for trials because she says, I have 5 siblings, 4 of 6 have FSHD. We have trouble because we're excluded due to things like cancer, diabetes, muscle loss, financial wherewithal. What can we do to help make the trials more accessible since we have such a small number of patients to choose from?
Yeah, well, right now, the Acceleron trial is the only trial going on that's interventional. There's observational trials, so I don't want you to get mixed up because a doctor might say, oh, I want you in this clinical trial, and it's an observational trial. Those are important. That's that preclinical, trying to analyze what we can measure when we do get interventional trials. But interventional trials are with the drug. Acceleron's the only one. And Acceleron, because it's a muscle regeneration or muscle building, has to have certain function. It's my personal belief, take that with a grain of salt, but it's my personal belief that a DUX4 trial, where there's a reduction of DUX4, the protocol for the different disease progressions might be a little wider, because all we have to do is prove that DUX4 has been reduced. I mean, the biggest challenge is then in reduction of DUX4, have we stalled the disease? Our researchers believe the answer is yes. We need to convince the FDA. But I think that the protocols might be wider. Also, the FSH Society, again, as that honest broker with all the stakeholders at the table, what happens a lot of times is we're brought into the protocol development discussion because industry understands, biopharmaceutical industry understands that they don't know our patient journey. They don't know, what fits in their daily walk and life and what doesn't fit, what they can do and what they can't do. And so sometimes they develop these protocols so tight that they can't enroll anybody in them. But if they have engaged us first, it allows those protocols to maintain the same scientific rigor, but to be widened a bit and to be more inclusive. And that's where we operate as a value-added partner to industry, but also as a value-added to our families.
That's a great point, Mark. I just want to mention also there's a really important study going on now, the RESOLVE study, which is being run on our clinical trial research network. And it's looking at a wide array of functional tests and, they're bringing in some biomarkers, imaging, et cetera. So that's the kind of study that can also help guide what the appropriate criteria should be in a future clinical trial. And we work closely with CTRN around engaging patients in focus groups so that patients can provide their views. For example, if you were on that focus group and you have these siblings, they have these conditions, will it really, skew the results of the trial if such and such patients were allowed to participate? And then we could, people can study that question ahead of time and then guide the company down the road that, you don't need to be so cautious about this particular criterion because you found it doesn't affect muscle strength or it still gives it, so that kind of back and forth, that kind of research right now is going on right now. And we can't underscore how important it is for people to be involved.
Yeah. June, while you were talking, I did the whole question answer thing. I clicked on my little screen. We just had a question about the expansion, the addition of the clinical trial network location in Virginia. Actually, the researcher that was in Salt Lake City, Utah, moved to Virginia, and so we still have one in Utah, and we've established one there now. So we have 8 sites, not 7 sites here in the States. And he said, what's the possibility of expansion? Right now, we're working with the Clinical Trial Research Network team, which is Jeff Statlin and Ravi Tawil as the principal investigators, and working with the coordinating center, which is University of Kansas. We're working out a memorandum of understanding where we would actually be involved in helping them expand that network. It's called now a Clinical Trial Research Network. We also understand there is value between having a kind of a second category fall under this umbrella. That's a clinical trial network that literally is positioned and set up under a unified regulatory and unified master service agreement to expedite the clinical trial process of sites that are ready to do clinical trials for FSHD patients. And we will be helping not just engage, but enlarge the network so that it is in more places across the United States. And there's actually, I think, 3 sites internationally that is a part of the clinical trial research network part. So there are 8 sites over here, and I think there are 3, or they're ramping up 3 overseas. But we know that we need to expand to maybe 20 sites or so. And I pulled that number somewhat out of the air, but I have had experience in this realm in other disease states too. So it looks like we will be growing and expanding. All of our conversations with Dr. Statlin and Dr. Tawil indicate that that's going to be a key role for the FSH Society to play as a part of this partnership that we have and that we possess with the CTRN. Our time is about up, so June?
Yes. Okay. So thank you all so much for participating today. This webinar has been recorded, so we can share it with anyone who's interested. I think we'll send out an email for the recording. So that's, if you, of course, have other questions that come up later, you know where to find us. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.